Hi. I'm just wanting to give you a little bit of feedback on Unit 3 and your posts, as well as perhaps just quickly review a couple of the key readings from Unit 2 before tomorrow. Remember, we've got a 7:30 appointment for those of you who can make it. Firstly, last week's readings on both Ice and Bice, which you probably didn't enjoy all that much because it's a proper refereed journal. And it comes up with a model with four different orientations that you can then compare and contrast different ethical case studies, etc., and anything that's coming up in the news. You can look at these four orientations. The first one is humane, the second is justice, third is responsibility and sustainability, and the fourth is moderation. Now, all of those four, there can be combos of all four in the one, or it may well be just purely one of those orientations. And so if you understand that this model will be really helpful to you right throughout the rest of the course, just grab hold of those four orientations, become really familiar with them so that you can discuss those and give examples of how you understand that. So that's one. The next reading was from Giles around the most important leadership competencies according to leaders around the world, and that was written in 2016. And they had come up with a table for that, and some of the key competencies were around strong ethics and safety, self-organisation, efficient learning, nurturing growth, and connections and belongings. And so there was some, the highest percentage was around those ethical and moral standards. I grabbed another model that I like a lot, well, not a model per se, it's a set of results from Google. And it was a study that they did on their top 200 teams in the world. And they came up with five of the key findings, which came up with number 5 was impact, number 4 was meaning, number 3 was structure and clarity, number 2 was dependability, and number 1 by a country mile, I mean, it really was so far ahead of all of the others, was what they called psychological safety, which I thought paralleled in some ways to the leadership competencies. And, again, you'll find this in many of the other readings that you come up with, such as Kouzes and Posner when they come, I think, next week, Unit 4. Anyway, so have a look at a couple of different models and compare and contrast those, because that will be really helpful for you to draw on when you're answering some of those case study questions. Now I'm going to move to week 3, Unit 3, which we'll be talking about tomorrow. Now I've noticed that there's only 2 responses to Unit 3 in discussion board, and that, in fact, those 2 responses were there a week ago, I think. And I have put a note there, so please read it. It's in red, and it's asking you to be fairly much more concise with your answer based on the question that you've been posed in the discussion. But let's just go back for a moment. You've got 3 readings, basically, and then an optional one. So there's Peter Drucker's, and that's, an oldie but a goodie. 1994, I mean, really. What's that? Anyway, Theory of Business is one of those seminal articles that remains valid, even though I think the only thing you could argue around this in terms of validity would be the time frame. But we'll touch on that in a moment. Kavadis, Lattice and Locke the 2016 article on transformative business model. Now, these two articles in particular will be discussed on the questions for your case study assignment. So those two. Then there's the Chambers one on Cisco, staying ahead of technology. Again, 2015. Technology is shooting faster than these articles are produced, I think. But it has some key points that are valid. And 2015, Dunn's article on the CEO of Bolthouse Farms, making carrots cool. So let's have a quick look. The first one being the one that you're being asked to talk about in the discussion. And I have noted here, there's three key assumptions that he talks about, and that's around mission, environment, and core competencies. And then he then unpacks those quite a lot. If you can just ignore all of the examples, because at 1994, half of them, with the global financial crisis, are probably dead and buried almost, some of them anyway. Assumptions around environment, what the organisation's paid for, assumptions around mission, what they consider to be meaningful, and then the third one around core competencies, that the competencies they need to really excel at to maintain leadership. So then he breaks that down even more, and he gives you 4 points. He says that all of the assumptions, environment, mission, and core competencies, must fit reality. The second one, he says that they also, all three of those assumptions have to fit one another, and the theory obviously must be known and understood throughout the organisation. And finally, and this is the one that I was highlighting before around time, is that the theory of business has to be tested constantly. Now, he talks about every 3 years. Now, obviously, that's probably every 3 months these days. So, from 1994 to now, things have just escalated to exponentially. So just be mindful of that. But the theory of business, you need to kind of answer each of those in this discussion question. You need to answer around your own organisation or previous organisation, around environment. So have a look at that and discuss number one, then discuss number two around mission, and then discuss number three, and then sort of say, well, yeah, they have or they haven't done any or all of those things. I think in the two answers so far, we've seen parts of relevance, but not really a concise answer if you sort of put it in a table and said, well, here are the three. Now, beside each of those three, here are my responses based on my organisation or how I perceive it to be. The next article, which isn't discussed or asking you to discuss on discussion board, it's around Kavadias's transformative business model. And he says that there's 6, and that your organisation, to be a transformative model, you need at least 3 or more of the features of the 6 that he identifies. And their personalisation, closed loop, asset sharing, usage-based pricing, collaborative ecosystem, and agile and adaptive. Now, this will be asked around your case study questions. You will be talking about Kavadias's article. So I would like you to think about that and also look at those explanations and see if your organisation has at least 3 of those as well. And if they don't, why is it perhaps not applicable? Because they're the sorts of answers you're going to be required to respond to the case study questions. So just become more familiar with how to get to the point and answer the question effectively. So I think that's all. Oh, other than, of course, Cisco saying, basically that they've had to have a startup mentality. They have to be bold with their when to jump. And it was interesting, he says at the end, that disrupting yourself can be really difficult. And he talks and gives an example of in 2014, I think. However, I thought that disrupting yourself, you could make a nice connection between that comment, that quote, with Drucker and his comment or his assumptions, where he says that theory of business has to be tested constantly, which is what Cisco is saying disruption is. It's about testing and disrupting, deliberately disrupting, as Drucker talks about. So I'm going to leave you with that. That's probably, that's 10 minutes, so more than enough. I'm going to talk to you, or some of you, tomorrow night at 7:30, and hopefully you will have added your comments on the discussion board, because it'd be useful for us to have a few more to talk about. Okay, see you tomorrow, I hope. Bye.